Hello, and welcome to a new lesson for English learners in grade 7. My name is Sanja Božinović, and I will be your English teacher today. Our today's lesson is Extraordinary Characters. In today's lesson, you will read a text about an extraordinary character from literature, and by the end of today's lesson, you will be able to understand the text and to describe a character who is extraordinary. For this lesson, you need your pencil and a notebook, and you will need your laptop or tablet or your mobile phone with the reliable internet connection and a QR code scanner. We start today's lesson by thinking about what makes a person extraordinary. Remember, extraordinary means unusual, remarkable, unusually great. If you don't know the word, you can copy the word, the pronunciation and the meaning into your notebook. Take your notebook and write your answer to the questions. What makes a person extraordinary? Then, in your notebook, create a list of words that you need when you talk about an extraordinary person. You can write, for example, that that person is good at different things, that person has a talent for or is talented. That person astonishes you, impresses you. Think of some other words and create your list in your notebook. I'm sure you have the whole list of words that you will need later for describing extraordinary talents. Let's stop for a moment and think about some talents that we hear about. Have you heard of these unusual talents, and how would you rank them? Can you rank from 1 to 5 these talents? Fast reading, slow motion walking, solving complex problems in your head, singing with your mouth closed, talking backwards. Can you add to this list? Which talent would you choose for yourself, and why? Please answer in writing. You can pause this video and write your answers into your notebook. You can share your answers with your colleagues and your teacher. Today we talk about Mr. Holmes. Mr. Holmes is a famous literary character. Do you know who he is? Do you know what his talent is? First, look at the picture. The picture can help you. You can see him and two words, problem, solution. What's he doing? Can you remember? If not, listen to a short scene from a story about Sherlock Holmes. And in that scene, Mr. Holmes meets his friend, Dr. Watson. Listen, maybe you will remember. Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Stamford, introducing us. How are you? He said cordially, gripping my hand. You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive. How on earth did you know that? I asked in astonishment. Never mind, said he, chuckling to himself. Here is a list of statements about this scene. Some of these statements are true and some are false. Let's read the statements first. 1. Stamford introduces Mr. Sherlock Holmes to Dr. Watson. 2. The narrator, the person who tells the story, is Mr. Stamford. 3. Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson shake hands when they meet. 4. Mr. Holmes came back to England from Afghanistan. And 5. Dr. Watson thinks that Mr. Sherlock Holmes is extraordinary. Now listen to the story and decide which statements are true and which are false. Listen carefully. Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Stamford, introducing us. How are you? He said cordially, gripping my hand. You have been in Afghanistan, I perceive. How on earth "Did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. "Never mind," he said, chuckling to himself. Let's check your answers. Number 1 is true. In this scene, Mr. Sherlock Holmes meets his friend Dr. Watson, and Dr. Watson tells the story, so number 2 is false. Number 3 is true. Mr. Holmes talks gripping Dr. Watson's hand. To grip somebody's hand, to take hold of it. Number 4 is false too. Dr. Watson came home to London from Afghanistan. And the last statement is true. Dr. Watson says, "How on earth did you know that?" He is very much surprised that Sherlock Holmes can deduce from just a second of looking at him that he returned to London from Afghanistan. It's time to write into your notebook again. Mr. Holmes is, please complete this sentence. His talent is, complete this sentence too. Of course, Mr. Holmes is a detective, and his talent is observation and deduction. He observes very well, and he makes conclusions. Is Mr. Holmes an extraordinary character? Is Mr. Watson an extraordinary character? Why? Why would you say that Mr. Holmes is an extraordinary character, and why would you say so about Mr. Watson? Think and complete your answers in your notebook. Before we go on and read the rest of the scene, it's time to practice some vocabulary. You can pause this video and access this word wall exercise. You can see the link on the screen, bit.ly Sherlock word wall, and you will see the words that you need for this lesson. Please access this word wall and practice writing, matching, reading the new words from this lesson. After you have learned the words that you need for this lesson, it's time for reading. You will see the link that you can see by scanning the code on the left-hand side of the screen, or you can just type this link bit.ly/Holmes text into your browser, and you will find the text. Read the text. In that text, Mr. Holmes explains how he does it. The questions for you are: what does he observe and what does he deduce? Remember, to observe means to notice, to perceive, and to deduce, to arrive at a conclusion. Here's the text. I hope you have managed to read the text. And here are the two questions. What does Mr. Holmes observe? And what does he deduce? And in highlighted lines, you will see his conclusions. Dr. Watson is an army doctor who has come home from the tropics, where he was probably injured. So by looking at Dr. Watson, the detective Sherlock Holmes can see different details, and then he can make conclusions. What is the train of thoughts and what is the train of reasoning? Please go back to the text for reading and answer these two questions. They will help you understand how the mind of a detective works. First, the train of thoughts coming one after another, observing things, observing details, and then the train of reasoning, making conclusion, deducing from the details that he has noticed. When you write your own answer with the help of the text, please describe Dr. Watson's reaction. Please share your answers with your classmates and your teacher. we will stop for a moment on Mr. Holmes's talent, on what makes him extraordinary. And that's his train of reasoning, the way he makes his conclusions, the way he deduces from his observations. Please stop for a moment and think, can you explain in your own words and answer these 3 questions? If you can't, go back to the text. How does Mr. Holmes deduce that Watson is an army doctor? What helps him conclude that he returned from a warm place? What helps him conclude that he returned from a war zone? I hope you have enjoyed reading about Sherlock Holmes and that you will read some more stories in the future. Now it's time to play Sherlock Holmes. It's time for you to observe and deduce. Your task for today is to choose a picture. Look carefully. Notice 3 details that can help you tell a story about that person. Let's imagine you are Sherlock Holmes. Pick your picture. Notice 3 details. Make your notes. Give that person a name. Think of a background. Who is that person? Organize your 3 ideas, your 3 details that you have noticed in the photo, into a story about that person. Find the details in the picture that will help you explain your conclusion. For example, if you have picked this picture, what name have you given to this character? What is your detail number 1? And what does it tell you about the person? Detail number 2, what do you deduce? Detail number 3, what is your conclusion? Then make your story about this person. Or maybe you like this one. What are your 3 details? And what do they tell you about this girl? What's her name? What's her story? What's her background? Play Sherlock Holmes. Some of you will like this character. Who is he? What's his story? What 3 details can you notice here? And what can you deduce from these 3 details on your list? Complete your list about one of the characters and build your story around your 3 details. Don't forget to give your character a name. Let's write. Now that you have all the details, you are ready to write your story. Create your story. Let it be 70 to 80 words long, not longer. In the first part, write the person's name, profession, a few details about the background. Then in the body of the text, in the middle part, tell the story about that person based on the 3 details from your list. In the last part of your story, there's your conclusion, how you worked out the facts. Write your story and share it with your classmates and your teacher. Here's a checklist that can help you. Before you share your story, go through this checklist and see that you named the person, described all 3 details, drew conclusions, organized your text, wrote full sentences, 70 to 80 words, and that you checked your spelling and punctuation. Then you're ready to share your story with your teacher and with your classmates. The last activity for this lesson is this exit card. You can choose to do one of the activities that you can see on the screen, or you can copy the link that you can see into your browser and access the wheel. Then you can spin it and see which activity to do. You can choose to write about what you knew before this lesson, what you have learned, about the questions that you still have, about what you would like to learn more, or you can just write one word to sum up today's lesson. I hope you have enjoyed learning about Mr. Sherlock Holmes and playing Sherlock Holmes. and especially writing your own story. I hope you'll keep learning about extraordinary talents and discovering extraordinary characters in new stories you read. My message for you at the end of today's lesson is make your lives extraordinary. That's all for today's lesson. Goodbye until our next lesson.